as we've seen before, massive increase in this, and we've gone from script kiddies to this is a major issue for organised crime, advanced persistent threats, all those sorts of things. Really, why has that happened? And there's a number of reasons. One of them is that a lot more tools are freely available now. So you can buy a lot of very good hacking tools on the internet or on the dark web. You can also rent them. So there is a sort of a SaaS type technology out there as well. So the whole bar or the entry level in terms of how people can get into this or how organizations can be exposed has been massively reduced. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but the top bit there shows lots of bubbles, and this is taken out of our X-Force research paper. It's been quite well liked, this sort of looking at the sort of the bubbles aspects, which are around how big the issues are across the sectors and how much that has increased over the years. And we've seen a huge increase over the last 3 years of a lot of targeted attacks to specific organizations going for specific technologies. And this is a lot of intellectual property that is disappearing outside of UK PLC. And not just large institutions, but the smaller ones as well, because they are part of the supply chain. So it's looking back through all of the key components of what your organizations are doing, who you're connecting to, and what your relationship is with them. You're not going to see most of that there, but computer services, government, pharmaceuticals, those are the sort of key activities that we're seeing in terms of targeted attacks. And why? Because they have a lot of research, they have a lot of critical data that organizations want to get hold of, because it is now a commodity marketplace. Because I can get that information, I can then go and I can then sell that to the highest bidder. So it's really changing from a threat landscape around the potential of something happening to it's actually a business now, and you need to mitigate against those risks. I think William Hague said back in December 2012 that there were 1,000 successful attacks on UK PLC per hour. You know, that's a huge amount, and a lot of organisations that I talk to really haven't got their head around that this is a real problem that they need to take action against now. So this slide gives you an indication in terms of how they're actually doing that, in terms of gaining access. Cross-site scripting, still a really major issue out there. Bypassing the security and gaining privileges. So we're seeing a lot of that within organisations. So people gaining access to services, gaining access to privileged accounts, then being able to jump and allow them to do various things within the organisation that maybe they shouldn't be allowed to do. So there's a technology meeting the actual business processes around this. So there's some great technology out there, and of course we have some great technology, but there's also how you actually put the processes and interlay the processes around that to mitigate against those particular threats. So a huge area that we're seeing now is that organizations have a lot of security technology, and they've had it for a long time. So it's been mitigating against a potential risk. So that's firewall, that's antivirus, that's content. So the perimeter type security is pretty well known. However, you know, the hackers or the attackers, okay, if something is well defended, then they go and find a different way of getting in. So it's a bit like your house. If you've got a really strong front door, then they'll go around and find if they can get through a window. And that's exactly what's happening. So the whole area's moved from, in terms of let's have the greatest security we can around the perimeter, to I'm not actually sure where my perimeter is these days, because I've got lots of mobile devices. We've heard about bring your own device, and IBM has got a huge program in place. In fact, I don't have any IBM technology. My Apple pad is my own, my Mac is my own, my phone is my own. So we have a very robust bring your own device. We got 400,000 people around the world, 200,000 contractors, lots of very sensitive information around the IBM network. So it's all around how you actually manage that and how you allow businesses to react and actually move forward in those environments. And what we're seeing is that there's a huge amount of data. So organizations don't really know what's going on the networks. They think they do, but they don't really know. And when I go around and I talk to organizations, the overwhelming problem is that we have no visibility no one pane of glass. We've got lots of different technologies out there, but how do we bring that into a holistic view? So we have technology and we have processes out there that we've refined over the years, because we've been trying to solve this problem going forward, because as we've heard before, lots of data, IP6, massive amounts of more data that's going to come out there. So log management is really old school. You know, if you're deploying log management technology now, you're really behind the curve, because by the time you've actually deployed it and you're looking at the logs, the event has gone and you've got lots more issues. So you've got tons of events that are going to have to be resolved. Within IBM, we have 17 billion security events a day. So that's a huge amount of stuff that we have to go through and prioritize. So the whole idea is you need to be able to quickly take the data and really focus it down into what we call an offense. So, you know, what has brought that to highlight in terms of an offense as opposed to lots of issues that you need to address. And the next thing is then, how do you actually do the triage on that? Because it's one thing actually finding the problem, as organizations have found problems, but how do you then react to that? How do they then put a process around that? How do they then do the forensic capability to look at what's happened? How can we actually change that going forward? So really looking at it from reconstituting that effect, you know, looking and mapping out, so we can then map out what the relationship is between the various issues, the various data sets, the various data points, the devices that were connected, so we can quickly see what's actually happening. And the really important thing, this is a non-technical view, because the problem with security, as we all know, it's perceived as being very technical, and in some areas it is. Cryptography, as we've heard about, is very technical, but businesses want to see or have a visualization of what's happening within the environment. So they need technology which is non-technical. Yes, we can offer managed services and we can help larger organizations in large environments, but smaller to medium organizations want to have their own sort of infrastructure in place, but they want to have to understand what they need to prioritize actually going forward. And the whole area of identity management, as the Earl was talking about there, in terms of, you know, who am I, what can I get to, what can I do? So it's moved on from a static password and ID to a more dynamic environment in terms of where am I, what am I trying to connect with, what am I trying to do, and more around risk-based access control and authorization, and looking at it from the device I'm connecting to, what's the constitute characteristics of that device, what am I trying to do, and that then superimposes a dynamic security profile around what that user can try to do based on the risk of the attributes that we've just assessed. Now clearly, if they go to a higher level and they want to access more sensitive information, then you can quickly then put enforcement around that, as opposed to having to go and re-engineer the back-end applications. So quickly you can get a more dynamic security infrastructure where you can start to enforce security depending on what that user is trying to do, depending on the sensitivity of that, who wants to access that information, why they have a business reason to do that, because that's extremely critical. And then it's a whole evolving process. So it's all around the identity, the federation of the identity around that, the look and the feel of that experience for the user. You know, not lots of passwords, logons, those sorts of things, but a seamless, secure interface into what they're actually trying to do. This is a whole big area in terms of the data, and you know, it's a really complexing and perplexing area in terms of, well, where is my sensitive data in the environment? And we're doing a lot of research around this. We've got 9 research centers around the globe, spend billions on research and trying to really get to the nub of how we can help organizations understand where their data resides. So we're doing a lot of advanced analysis around this in terms of being able to mine effectively the infrastructure, being able to then relate that back to a corporate directory infrastructure, and then see who's got responsibility for those documents and those assets, and then starting to then put a policy around how you can then enforce the security in a more pragmatic way. I'm not saying this is easy. It's extremely difficult. It's because it's a whole evolving area. Once documents are moved around, it's very difficult to track where they're going. So it's a whole area in terms of how you actually manage those and the technology that's used to actually siphon and get that information back. And we've developed some very innovative technology in terms of web crawling technologies around that. We have the largest spam database in the world. We have the largest IP reputation database in the world. So we have lots of intellectual property around that we can bring to the mix. We've heard about bringing your own devices. I love it. It's great. I can bring my own technology in. There's a process around that, critical, that bit. You know, there's education around that. That's a critical element. And then there's the enforcement of that in terms of software that needs to be deployed on those target endpoints to manage that infrastructure. So how do you provide containerization? How do you protect critical information that's critical to the organization, and yet allow that user to actually have their own personal data on that as well? And again, how do they interface into the corporate environment in terms of the risk-based authentication, authorization around the device that they're connecting to, so we can scan that device in real time, we can understand what the limitations of that in terms of the exposure to the business could potentially be, and if that risk is larger that I'm prepared to accept, then at that time I won't allow that device to connect until they do some remediation, or we automate that remediation for them. So the whole area of a sort of a transparent security middleware layer between the user and what they're trying to do is growing, and that's due to the necessity to actually do that from a pragmatic perspective. Because if you put hurdles in people's ways, and security is seen as a disabler, but it should be an enabler for businesses, all of the infrastructure should be securely built from the start. And that goes to the next chart, if I can go back, which is around the applications. So we've seen 50% of our 50% of the applications that we look at around our organization and companies that we look at have vulnerabilities in, still vulnerabilities. So is that due to incorrect coding? So how do we help in terms of the coding as it's actually being done in real time, the real-time threats through our analysis and our research, and then do sort of dynamic analysis on that technology before it's deployed. And the X-Force is something that we've kept hidden for quite a long time, successfully. Great stealth marketing, or not as the case may be. But it is a large research arm that we have within IBM that looks holistically across all security aspects. So we have that capability. We have the technology that we've looked at in terms of our IP reputation, spam database. There's also vulnerability database that can be accessed as well. But now this information can be then integrated and downloaded into the customer's technology that they've got deployed. So they're not really worrying about the latest and greatest in terms of updating the technology to react to those mitigating threats, but they can take feeds in from our advanced research capability to actually make them security posture more viable going forward. So we have a framework around this. This is the IBM Security Blueprint, and this looks at the business processes around all of the critical areas, the people, the data, the application, and the processes, and then maps that down into services and technology, so we can provide holistic capabilities around, you can buy technology, we can run that technology for you, or we can manage that service for you if you don't have the in-house capability to do that.